This week, we're talking about Camino magic. What do people mean when they talk about the magic of the Camino? I'm going to share 3 very real, genuine stories about Camino magic, coming right up. Okay, be warned, this may not be a short video because I'm going to relate 3 stories. And they're stories about what I tend to refer to as Camino moments or Camino magic. They're those sort of magical things that happen sometimes when you're walking a Camino, which very often are totally unexplainable, but which I think are part of the charm and the attraction of walking a Camino. So I'm going to share 3 things, unless I think of any more, that actually happened to me. Now, before I do that, it's interesting, I was chatting to a few people online recently about some of the sort of more emotional and spiritual elements of the Camino. And one guy in particular sort of said, oh, you know, I've kind of missed that, I think, on my first Camino. And so that's kind of what prompted me to want to talk about this, because I think particularly for people walking their first Camino, they can be a little bit too focused on the mechanics of the actual walking and the destination and, you know, trying to maintain a schedule. I must apologise, I'm just getting over a bit of flu, so I may have to sort of dab around a bit with a tissue. And I think that's the reason I really wanted to sort of do this video this week and talk about some of the more magical elements of the Camino. And I can remember sitting down actually with an American couple and a guy having dinner in Castro Jerez on my very first Camino. And I was relating one of these stories, and we'd had a bit of wine, I have to confess. And the guy sitting opposite me kind of looked at me and went, "That's what I want. I haven't had that yet." And he was so enthralled with one of these stories. You know, he said, "Oh, that's what I came on Camino for, to have something like that happen." And why hadn't it happened for him? I don't know, but I would say if you want magical things to happen, be open. And I will get to these 3 magical stories in a moment, but be open for the magic to happen. And I find I'm more open to that when I'm walking alone. So if you've been following the channel for a while, you know I've only walked 3 Caminos so far. Hopefully I'll be doing many more. My first Camino was on my own from Saint-Jean, 800 kilometers, which was absolutely magical. My second and third were with my wife Pat, which were, yes, magical in different ways. Both great experiences, but very different. And if I really want to experience the magic of the Camino, and I've had this conversation with Pat, I find I really have to do it on my own. And why is that better? I think walking on your own, you're more receptive. When I'm walking with someone, I'm talking to them, I'm being attentive to their needs. You know, not meaning this in any nasty way, but they're a distraction. They're distracting me from that inner journey. So it makes the Camino more of an outer journey. Whereas on my own, I'm deep in thought and I'm much more aware of my surroundings, and almost like the energy of the Camino. You know, yeah, it's more like it's a much more emotional and spiritual journey on your own, I think. And it becomes almost this sort of walking meditation, which is very hard if you're walking with other people. And so regardless, and particularly if you're planning your first Camino, if you're going with someone, or you know, on the more popular Caminos, you'll meet other people that you're going to walk with. Try to get time alone. Pat recognises this too, and she said if she ever comes on another Camino with me, she'd like us to walk separately during the day, and maybe, you know, meet up for lunch, meet up in the evenings and things like that, because she recognises too that it's a very different journey walking on your own. So I guess by way of a tip, try either go on a Camino on your own, or if you're with other people, try to get, you know, days where you're able to walk a fair bit on your own. You know, even if you're like a few hundred meters apart, So you can kind of lose yourself in your thoughts a bit. The other thing, I think, if you want some of the magic to happen, is to be realistic about your expectations, and you know, don't get upset if things go wrong. You know, if you get injured, you know, I've been injured on every single Camino. You know, get over it, deal with it. You know, if you wanted to stay in a certain place and you can't get accommodation, or you were so looking forward to eating at this restaurant that everyone talks about and it was closed, you know, kind of that's Camino. Just roll with it, you know. And as I've said on other videos, sometimes when you were expecting something to happen and it doesn't, that door may have closed, but others open, and you know, magical things can happen. So I really don't get disappointed about whatever happens on my Camino, because I kind of look upon it as maybe there's an opportunity that's going to come up. And I will get to the stories in just a minute, but it kind of reminds me when I'm walking on my own, and this came about through my first Camino, and I won't go into the big long story about it, but I basically got injured training for the Camino, and I rocked up for my first Camino with Achilles tendonitis, barely able to walk, and so every day for me was an achievement, you know, that I actually managed to get through the day, and it became a ritual for me that every evening, I'm not a religious person, really. I'm spiritual. You know, I guess I like to feel like I'm a believer, but I don't go to church or anything like that. But every evening I would give thanks for having been able to get through another day. And every morning I would give thanks. So basically every church I came to, I would give thanks. So just for being able to kind of make that journey. And I think, you know, having that focus on the now is really important. Okay, so the three stories. So there's the background. These three happened on my very first Camino, walking alone, day by day, never sure really if I was going to make it to Santiago, because I was you know, injured at the start and remained injured all the way through. I had said to my doctor before I started out, you know, if I take it easy, will it get better along the way? And she said, no, it'll just get worse, and it did. So anyway, with that background, I suppose I was very open to experience every little bit that the Camino had to offer, because I never knew really if that was going to be my last day or not. If you know, my injuries would get so bad that I might have to go home. And so I really opened myself up, and you know, every day that mantra was, you know, I'd kneel in prayer and say, you know, basically, thank you, Lord, for another day on the Camino. I promise to be open to any lesson that you have for me, you know, during this journey, and just want to thank you for allowing me to have another day, you know, something along those lines. And I saw lessons, I learned lessons every day, and I don't know whether I was kind of tuned into it or whatever, you know, because of my situation. But anyway, let me share three of them. Sorry, it took me a long time to get there. So this one was taking the sort of cross-country route out of Leon towards Hospital de Orbigo, and it was a little village, was it Villavante or something like that? It's about 5 or 6 k's before you get to Hospital, and my legs were really playing up that day. You know, I was having to go through this routine of strapping my ankles and icing and resting and elevating, and I was taking anti-inflammatories and painkillers on the dot every 4 hours, you know, under my doctor's advice. And some days just got really, really painful. And I was coming into this little village, and I thought, okay, I'm going to stop for a coffee here. And I was really feeling sorry for myself, you know. I was like really unhappy with the pain, and you know, wondering how much further it was to get through to the next town. Yeah, just having one of those really glum days. And I went into the cafe, and I'd ordered a cup of coffee, and I was sitting outside the cafe, and the Camino kind of comes around the corner to the front of the cafe. And this guy walked in, you know, a few minutes after me. And I noticed him out of the corner of my eye as he walked into the cafe, and it didn't register initially, and I thought, that's funny looking socks. And he had different coloured socks on, knee-length socks. And one of them was this really sort of bright colour, and he went in to get his coffee and he came out, and I glanced across again and I thought, oh, you fool. It was an artificial leg. And, you know, one of these sort of brightly coloured artificial leg from the knee down. And I glanced at this guy and I thought, oh, this is the kind of stuff that happened to me every day on that Camino. I went, okay, Lord, I get it. I'm a selfish idiot. You know, here am I worried about my pain and my Achilles tendons, and this guy's, you know, got an artificial leg. You know, he can do it. Gee, you know, if you're, you know, if that's what I'm talking about, if you're sort of open to lessons and things as you're walking, these things are put in front of you all of the time, I find. And I just felt so ashamed and embarrassed that, you know, I was feeling glum. You know, and here was someone who was physically in a far worse state than I was, although it didn't seem to hold him back walking. And anyway, so I left that village, and, you know, with a spring in my step, and I vowed to never, ever complain about my injuries again. And, you know, do not be such a selfish bloody idiot that you're, you know, feeling sorry for yourself just because you've got tendonitis or something like that, you know. So that was an amazing, amazing lesson. And then blow me, it would have been about 20 minutes later. I think it's, my apologies, I can't remember the name of the village, but you're walking along basically an old railway line then into Hospital de Orbigo. And these things always seem to happen in multiples on the same day. Not quite a burning bush, but anyway, I'm a little while later and I'm walking along, and it was a very overcast day, and I find my mood is affected by the weather a bit. You know, I'm kind of more upbeat and bouncy when it's nice weather, and when it's grey and overcast, and, you know, I'm a little bit glum. And I was walking down along this old railway line, and I stopped for a moment, and I think I felt the need to sort of give thanks again, and I knelt by the side of the track and just stopped for a moment in thought, and I looked up at this tree, and I don't know what kind of tree it was, some sort of cherry blossom or something like that. All these beautiful pink flowers on this tree, and you know, I probably in my mind or said out loud or something, you know, oh, I'm just so grateful to be able to make this journey, you know, thank you. And with that, a breeze picked up. And I know this sounds ridiculous, but the clouds parted a bit and the sun shone down onto the tree, and a breeze picked up, and suddenly the air was filled with pink petals. And I almost sort of burst into tears, you know. Kind of what just happened, you know, and it was like that scene, do you know the movie The Last Samurai with Tom Cruise in it? And there's that wonderful scene at the end where the old samurai is dying on the battlefield, and he wants to die with honour and so on. And just as he's dying, he looks up and he sees all these cherry blossom petals falling, you know, and he goes, perfect, just perfect. And then he dies, you know. It's kind of one of those moments, you know, where it had been overcast and all the rest of it all day long, and I just stopped for a moment, you know, just to, I guess, give thanks for being able to make the journey, and that magic just happened. You know, imagine it, if I'd been with a group of people, I would have been chattering away and walking along, and nothing would have happened. And I think sometimes when you're walking alone, you just notice stuff, and you take your time, and you allow things to happen around you, you know. You're probably watching this thinking I'm a bloody lunatic, but you know, these are things that genuinely happened. And it would be so easy to be oblivious to them and not to see the lessons in them. So anyway, if you're not convinced that magic happens, let me relate the third story. And I'll try and think of some more, but this was pretty amazing. So this would have been on the way into Leon. And I'd probably been walking for about 3 weeks. So we'll back up a little bit. I haven't seen the guy with the artificial leg or the cherry blossoms yet. And I think at about the 2 or 3 week point, I was kind of getting a bit glum. I'm not always glum on Camino, don't worry. Maybe these things happen the days that I am feeling a bit glum. But the situation was that my wife Pat had originally intended coming on this Camino with me, but she couldn't. Her father was sick. She went back up to Bangkok in Thailand to look after her father, who was having heart problems. And she had basically said, look, you go on your own. You're more into it than I am, kind of thing. And so that's what I did. So as well as, sort of limping along at a fairly slow pace, I had this sort of nagging thing going on in the back of my mind that I was being incredibly selfish. And, here I was sort of taking, it took me 40 days to walk, taking all this time out when Pat was back at home looking after her father. And so I was on this sort of guilt trip as well. And this was all sort of going through my head at about the 3-week point as I was coming into Leon. And there was this sort of track going through some farmland. And having said that I'm not a particularly religious person, but spiritual, a very good friend of mine had given me a crucifix to wear when I was walking, a Catholic friend. And it was a beautiful antique rosary with this silver crucifix on it. And I wore this every day because it kind of, I don't know, it just felt right to do that. And because it was, a bit of a spiritual journey for me. I don't know, it kind of just gave me this comfort wearing it. I mean, not that I pray the rosary or anything like that. And anyway, I was walking along this track sort of before Leon, and I had had some amazing experiences up to that point. And you know how they talk about the Caminos where you go through sort of 3 phases? There's the physical bit, and then when you kind of get used to that, there's the emotional bit, and then you get used to that, and then you kind of hit this, almost sort of Zen state, spiritual element. I'd had all of that, and I'd had such a wonderful experience. And then there's this kind of guilt going on in the back of my mind about whether I should continue or not, or should I just head home and help Pat. And this was sort of going through my head as I was on my way into Leon. And maybe I overthink these things, or maybe this is part of, when you're walking on your own, you kind of overthink things. And I'd had so much really cool stuff happen that I felt I'd probably got a lot of value out of the Camino already, and maybe I didn't need to kind of walk all the way into Santiago, another, whatever it was, 3 weeks. So yeah, I paused at the side of the track, and I held this crucifix that this friend had given me. And I just spoke out loud, and I said, okay, I need some help here. I don't know whether I should be going home or not. I've had a wonderful experience so far, but I feel like I'm being a bit selfish and that I should really go home now and help Pat, who's struggling with things at home. And I held the crucifix and I looked up at the clouds and said, how does this work? Do the clouds part? Do you give me a sign? Does like a Monty Python finger come out of the sky? What happens? I need some help. I need some guidance. I wasn't sort of upset or anything. I guess I was kind of conflicted. I wasn't sure what I really should be doing at that point, and genuinely wanted some advice. And so I sat and looked at the clouds, waiting for the clouds to part, and what happened? Nothing. Okay, that was a bit of an anticlimax. So I got up and I started walking. And then after about 100 meters, and this is a 100% true story. I think I've shared this once before when I was talking to David. I'd walked about 100 meters, and an old guy was coming the other way. He's probably in his 70s, 80, with a sheepdog. And he dressed like a shepherd. And he walked past this side of me. And I didn't pay a lot of attention. I mean, I was being polite. Saying, buenos dias. And he looked up at me and said, buenos dias, hola, something like that. And as someone's passing and you're sort of saying a greeting, your eyes kind of meet. And my eyes met his, and a shock just went through my body. My hair stood up because I was looking at the eyes of my father, who had died some 13, 14 years previously, without a shadow of a doubt. that was my father looking back at me. And I just stopped in my tracks and, wow, what just happened? And I looked around and the shepherd had stopped about 50 metres past me and looked back at me and kind of waved. And I went, okay, that just happened, to use that term. And I was kind of pondering this, and I thought, well, I guess that's kind of a sign, isn't it? And I was thinking about this, and I was walking along a little bit further, and my phone rang. My phone never rings when I'm on Camino, because only Pat, my wife, has the number. And I make sure that every morning before I set out, or every evening, that I would have a quick chat on Skype or something like that, make sure she was okay. We never spoke through the day. And my phone rang. I was like, who the heck is calling me? And I answered the phone. And this was literally 2 minutes after I'd seen the shepherd. And it was Pat. I said, well, what are you calling me for? How's your father? Is something wrong? She said, no, everything's fine. Dad's fine. I said, I just thought I'd call, see how you were going. And she'd never called me. And I said, oh, look, it's going really well. I said I was feeling a little bit guilty, and I'm wondering whether I should come home or not. And she said, absolutely not. You've been looking forward to this for so long. I was going to come with you on it, and I can't because of Dad. She said, you make sure that you finish this, that you really get everything out of it that you want. Continue to the ocean if you can, but you finish this for the both of us. And okay, I will. And, I put the phone together again, and I'm starting to think, okay, I guess this is a sign. And I'm sort of trying to process all of this. And there was a slight incline, and I'm walking up the incline, and I hear this person coming up behind me, crunch, 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 crunch. And then there's this slap on the back. How you going, Rob? And it's Rob from Melbourne. Yes, mate, if you're watching this. And Rob from Melbourne, I hadn't seen probably. I'd met him very briefly way back, maybe 2 weeks ago, and I hadn't seen him since. And here was Rob from Melbourne, full of beans, walking up this slope together. How you going? And like you do, we're exchanging and where we'd stayed and who had we seen recently and where we're going to go to. And Rob just lifted my spirits even more. And he walks a heck of a lot quicker than I do. So, after a few minutes, I couldn't really keep up with Rob. And off he went, and I said, see you tonight, Rob, maybe in Leon, wherever. I think I did meet him again about a week later, and off he went. And I was just blown away because I had really been a bit out of sorts and was struggling with a decision. And I had asked for help. I had asked for guidance. And I had seen who I honestly, genuinely believe, the spirit of my dead father. My wife had called me, who never calls me when I'm on Camino, and somebody I hadn't seen for 2 weeks who was full of beans and energy had come along to lift my spirits. All of that happened within the space of 5 minutes after me asking for help. That, to me, is Camino magic. And other things like that happened to me on that first Camino. Maybe, because I was walking alone, maybe because of the circumstances, I was in a heightened state of, feeling grateful for being able to make the journey. But I think what was key to it was, probably being alone and being more receptive, being more aware of what's going on around you, but also just being totally open to whatever comes along. And, I still say that little prayer, that mantra, every day before I set out. Lord, thank you for allowing me to have another day on this journey. I'll be open to whatever lesson you can teach me. And that I still say that every day when I'm setting out in the morning. And I make sure that I'm open. And the magic happens. Maybe I'll share a few more of those stories, but have you had any stories like that? Things happen like that? Sort of magical Camino moments that are absolutely, you can't explain or appear to be some sort of lesson from, beyond the mortal or whatever, who knows. But I just thought I'd share those with you because having spoken with a few people recently about some of the different aspects of Camino and the inner journey and the outer journey and all that kind of stuff, I thought they might be of interest. So please don't think I'm a lunatic. These things actually happened. I am sane, but I just thought I'd share them with you because particularly if you're planning your first Camino, be open. Don't have too many expectations. Don't be upset if your plans go wrong. Maybe your plans are going wrong for a reason. Maybe you're being shown something else which you wouldn't have seen. Who knows? But for me, that's the magic of the Camino. Thanks for watching. See you next time.